Imagine a paradise sculpted by volcanoes and caressed by turquoise waters, an archipelago of unparalleled beauty. Now imagine this paradise not as a tranquil haven, but as a crucible of power, a land fractured by ambition, where the very act of existing was a constant challenge. This was Hawaii in the late 18th century, a mosaic of warring kingdoms, each ruled by powerful chiefs, their alliances as fluid as the ocean tides, their rivalries as fierce as the volcanic fire. Into this tumultuous world, a child was born, a figure whose legend would echo through centuries, a man destined to reshape an entire civilization. His name was Kamehameha, and his story is not merely one of conquest, but of an extraordinary vision that defies the conventional narratives of his time. How did one man, against immense odds, fundamentally transform a fragmented archipelago into a unified nation? The answer lies hidden in the whispers of ancient prophecies, the clashing of spears, and the strategic brilliance of a king unlike any other. The Hawaiian Islands were a realm of paradoxes. Lush valleys cradled by mist-shrouded peaks, black sand beaches where the sea whispered secrets, and a vibrant culture deeply connected to the land and the gods. Yet, beneath this idyllic surface, a complex political landscape simmered with tension. 4 primary kingdoms vied for dominance: the Big Island of Hawaii, Maui, Oahu, and Kauai. Each was ruled by an ali'i nui, the paramount chief whose authority, while formidable, was constantly contested by lesser chiefs within their own domain and by powerful rivals from neighboring islands. Picture a chessboard, but instead of static pieces, each one is a living, breathing entity with its own ambitions, its own loyalties, and its own arsenal of warriors. This was the volatile dance of power that defined pre-unified Hawaii. The constant state of flux meant that peace was a fleeting luxury. Raids, skirmishes, and full-scale invasions were common occurrences. The goal for each ali'i nui was simple: expand their territory, increase their prestige, and secure their lineage. But no one had ever dared to dream of uniting all the islands under a single banner. It was considered an impossibility, a foolish fantasy in an era defined by tribal warfare and fragmented rule. Yet, a prophecy, a whisper from the ancient world, spoke of such a destiny. It foretold the coming of a great war, marked by the appearance of a rare feathered comet, a celestial messenger known as Kokoiki. This star, it was said, would herald the birth of the one who would conquer and unify the islands, a stark departure from the endless cycle of conflict. It's against this backdrop that our story truly begins, with the birth of Paia, later known as Kamehameha I. The exact date of his birth remains shrouded in a captivating historical ambiguity, falling somewhere between 1736 and 1761. This imprecision only adds to the mystique surrounding him, a figure seemingly born outside of conventional time, destined for greatness from the very beginning. Born on the Big Island of Hawaii, he was a descendant of noble ali'i lines, deeply rooted in the aristocratic fabric of Hawaiian society. However, his early life was far from pampered. Legend has it that he was born amidst a storm of thunder and lightning, a powerful omen that resonated with the ancient prophecies. Fearing threats to the infant's life, even then, he was secreted away and raised in secret by certain ali'i families, a testament to the political dangers that surrounded even a child of destiny. His early years were a crucible, forging the strength and cunning that would define his future. He learned the arts of war, the intricacies of diplomacy, and the profound wisdom of his culture. He was a protege of his uncle, King Kalaniʻopuʻu, the powerful ruler of the Big Island. But even under his uncle's patronage, Kamehameha was not guaranteed an easy path to power. Hawaiian succession was often a brutal affair, decided more by might than by birthright. Upon Kalaniʻopuʻu's death in 1782, the Big Island fragmented, becoming a battleground for several contenders. The primary rivals included Kawala'o, Kalani'opu'u's son and the designated heir, and Keokuahu'ula, another powerful chief with his own aspirations. Kamehameha, though a prominent figure, was just one among many, yet his ambition was singular. He saw beyond simply ruling a part of an island. He envisioned a unified Hawaii. This was an anomaly, a grand vision in an era defined by localized warfare, a spark of destiny that would ignite an unprecedented transformation. Before we delve into the full scale of Kamehameha's ambition and the truly monumental task he set before himself, it's crucial to understand the intricate social and political landscape of Hawaii at that time. The islands were not a peaceful paradise. They were a complex tapestry of constantly shifting alliances, bitter rivalries, and brutal warfare. Genealogy was paramount. One's lineage determined their status, their power, and their right to rule. The sacred bloodlines of the Ali, the Hawaiian nobility, defined the societal hierarchy. Marriage was often a strategic tool, consolidating power and forging new connections between powerful families, further intertwining their fates. The islands were also deeply spiritual. Every aspect of life, from fishing to warfare, was intertwined with religious practices, rituals, and the favor of the gods. Priests held immense influence, their interpretations of omens and prophecies often shaping political decisions and even the course of battles. This spiritual dimension is critical because Kamehameha, throughout his campaign, would skillfully weave divine mandate into his secular ambitions, presenting himself not just as a conqueror, but as an instrument of higher powers. The volcanic landscapes, dramatic coastlines, and lush valleys each held its own spiritual significance, its own history of conflict and cooperation. To conquer Hawaii was not merely a military feat, it was a profound spiritual undertaking, requiring not just strength in battle but also cunning in diplomacy, and, crucially, the ability to inspire absolute loyalty. Kalani'opu'u's death plunged the islands into a predictable, brutal struggle for supremacy, a struggle from which Kamehameha would emerge not just victorious, but transformative. When Kalani'opu'u, the ruling ali'i nui of Hawaii Island, died in 1782, a power vacuum erupted, plunging the island into precisely the kind of internecine warfare that had defined Hawaiian politics for centuries. His death triggered not a smooth transition, but a brutal, immediate struggle for power, a grim game of thrones played out on volcanic slopes and lush valleys. Following tradition, Kalani'opu'u bestowed his religious authority and control over much of the island to his son, Kawala'o. However, to Kamehameha, he bequeathed the war god Kukailamoku, a deity whose very name means Ku, the snatcher of land. This symbolic act, separating secular power from divine military might, was a tinderbox, igniting an inevitable clash between cousin and nephew, between inherited rule and prophesied destiny. Kamehameha thus found himself in a precarious position, a contender among many, armed with a formidable spiritual weapon, but facing established lineage and a larger domain. The stage for his legendary ascent was set, and the opening act was swift and bloody. The first major confrontation, the Battle of Moku Ohai, occurred just months after Kalani'opu'u's death. It was not merely a skirmish, but a brutal, full-scale engagement that would prove pivotal to Kamehameha's early career. Kawala'o, asserting his inherited right, made the first move, attempting to consolidate his hold over the island. Kamehameha, however, was not one to yield. He rallied his forces, bolstered by the unwavering loyalty of key allies, most notably Keeaumoku, a powerful and sagacious chief from Kohala. Keeaumoku, who would eventually become Kamehameha's father-in-law, was a strategic genius and a fierce warrior, his experience and influence critical in these early, uncertain days. The battle itself, fought on the Kona coast, was a ferocious clash, characterized by the traditional Hawaiian weapons of spears, clubs, and slingshots. The exact details are lost to antiquity, but the outcome was decisive. Kawala'o was killed, and his forces were routed. This victory at Moku'ohai was more than just a military triumph. It was a powerful affirmation of Kamehameha's burgeoning leadership and a concrete sign that the war god Ku was indeed on his side. It legitimized his claim to power in the eyes of many chiefs and warriors, marking his emergence as a dominant force on the Big Island. However, the death of Kawala'o did not bring immediate peace to Hawaii Island. Instead, it fragmented the kingdom further. The great chiefs, no longer bound by a single ruler, carved up the island among themselves, creating a chaotic patchwork of competing factions. Over the next decade, Kamehameha embarked on a relentless campaign of consolidation, a masterclass in both military prowess and political maneuvering. He systematically eliminated opposition, either through direct engagement on the battlefield or through shrewd alliances and strategic marriages. He understood that loyalty had to be earned and maintained, not merely demanded. He integrated conquered warriors into his own forces, showing clemency to those who submitted and ruthlessness to those who defied him. Chiefs who proved their worth were rewarded, creating a powerful, unified fighting force under his command. One of the most enigmatic and crucial events in Kamehameha's path to unifying the Big Island occurred near Pu'ukohola Heiau in 1791, the mysterious death of his last significant rival, Keoua Ku'ahu'ula. The story surrounding this event is steeped in prophecy and divine intervention. A seer named Kapukahi prophesied that if Kamehameha built a large heiau, a temple, dedicated to his war god Kuka'ilimoku at Pu'ukohola, he would conquer all the islands. Kamehameha dedicated years to the colossal task of constructing this massive war temple, personally hauling stones to its summit, demonstrating not only his piety, but also his immense mana, his spiritual power. It was a monumental undertaking involving thousands of laborers, a testament to his growing influence and the belief in his destiny. Once the heiau was completed, tradition dictated a significant sacrifice. Kamehameha sent an invitation, or perhaps a summons, to Keoua, his cousin and last major challenger on Hawaii Island, to meet him at the newly consecrated temple. Keoua, despite warnings, set sail for Pu'ukohola. What happened next remains a subject of intense debate. Was it divine intervention, drawing Keoua directly into a preordained sacrificial role? Was it a carefully orchestrated trap designed to neutralize the last threat to Kamehameha's supremacy? Or was it a strategic surrender, an acknowledgement by Keoua that further resistance was futile and that his fate was sealed? As Keoua's canoe approached the shore, a melee erupted. Accounts vary, but the consensus is that Keoua and his companions were attacked and killed. His body was then carried to the summit of Pu'ukohola Heiau and offered as the culminating sacrifice, symbolically legitimizing Kamehameha's claim to the entire island. The symbolism of Pu'ukohola Heiau is profound. It was not just a structure of stone, it was a potent manifestation of Kamehameha's destined kingship and the spiritual underpinnings of his quest for unification. Its construction, the fulfillment of prophecy, and the subsequent sacrifice of Keoua transformed Kamehameha from a mere claimant to an anointed ruler, an instrument of the gods. The heiau served as a powerful emblem, a silent declaration that the fragmentation of Hawaii Island was over, and that a new, unified era under Kamehameha's rule had begun, blessed by the divine. With the Big Island finally secured, Kamehameha was now ready to look beyond its shores, his gaze fixed on the broader horizon of the Hawaiian archipelago. His ambition wasn't merely personal, it was intertwined with a prophecy he was said to embody. Ancient Hawaiian lore foretold of a warrior who would unite the islands through conquest, a warrior whose power would be both earthly and divine. While the priest had already solidified his divine right to rule over the Big Island, the unification of all Hawaii would be the ultimate fulfillment. The strategic acumen required for such a monumental task could not be overstated. This was not a simple matter of overwhelming force, but a complex dance of diplomacy, psychological warfare, and calculated military campaigns, all orchestrated against a backdrop of deep-seated rivalries among the island chiefs. Kamehameha understood that true power lay not only in victory on the battlefield, but also in the minds of his enemies and his own people. He was about to embark on a journey that would redefine the very political landscape of the Hawaiian archipelago. But this monumental task, the unification of an entire archipelago, would require more than just prophecy and strategic brilliance. It would demand an unprecedented adaptation to a seismic shift in the Hawaiian world, the arrival of outsiders. The late 18th century marked a turning point, an era where the ancient rhythms of Hawaiian life began to intertwine with the burgeoning forces of European expansion. It all started with an unexpected visit, one that would irrevocably alter the course of Hawaiian history. In 1778, the sleek, imposing vessels of Captain James Cook appeared on the horizon, carrying with them not just men from a distant land, but also the seeds of technological revolution. Beyond the initial awe and cultural exchange, Cook's arrival exposed Hawaiians to a world of previously unimaginable tools and weapons. Muskets, cannons, and metal ships, these were not merely curiosities. They were instruments of power, capable of reshaping the balance of control within the islands. For a leader like Kamehameha, who possessed an astute military mind, the implications were immediate and profound. He saw not just objects, but opportunities. This initial exposure quickly escalated. Following Cook, a steady trickle, then a flow, of European and American traders began to frequent the Hawaiian Islands. They came for sandalwood, provisions, and to exploit the island's strategic location. And with them, they brought more of their will, more guns, more gunpowder, more iron, and an ever-increasing exposure to Western military tactics and shipbuilding techniques. For many Hawaiian chiefs, these foreign elements were enticing, perhaps even status symbols. But for Kamehameha, they were critical components of a grand strategy. He recognized that the traditional Hawaiian arsenal, the razor-sharp pahoa, daggers, the formidable ko'oko'o, spears, and the deadly ma, slings, while effective in close quarters, simply could not stand against the destructive power of a cannonball or the range of a musket volley. It was during this period of increasing foreign contact that two pivotal figures entered Kamehameha's life, playing roles far beyond that of mere castaways. Their stories are interwoven with Kamehameha's rise, a testament to his unique ability to integrate foreign knowledge into his vision for a unified Hawaii. In 1790, two men, John Young, an English boatswain, and Isaac Davis, a Welsh sailor, found themselves unexpectedly marooned on the Big Island. Their ship, the Fair American, was attacked by a local chief, and a subsequent skirmish led to their capture. While many a chief would have simply executed them or kept them as curiosities, Kamehameha saw their immense value. These men possessed invaluable knowledge of European artillery, musketry, and naval strategy, skills that were utterly alien to Hawaiian warfare. Kamehameha's genius lay in his ability to not only comprehend the advantage these foreign implements offered, but also to assimilate the foreigners themselves into his inner circle. Young and Davis were not treated as mere prisoners. They became trusted advisors, taught the Hawaiians how to use and maintain firearms, how to construct fortifications, and critically, how to repair and sail Western ships. Young, in particular, proved to be an invaluable asset, becoming a high-ranking military commander and later the governor of Hawaii Island. Davis, likewise, served as an advisor and translator, helping bridge the cultural and linguistic gaps that could have easily derailed Kamehameha's ambitions. Their loyalty, earned through respectful treatment and shared purpose, demonstrates Kamehameha's foresight and diplomatic prowess. He understood that knowledge, freely given and effectively utilized, was a greater weapon than any musket. The integration of these foreign elements, however, presented a profound dilemma, a warrior king's conundrum. How do you balance the revered traditions of Hawaiian warfare, steeped in centuries of custom and spiritual significance, with alien technologies that could fundamentally alter the nature of battle? For centuries, Hawaiian warriors had honed their skills with traditional weapons, their prowess measured by individual bravery and mastery of ancient fighting styles. The introduction of muskets, which allowed a warrior to kill from a distance, or cannons, which could obliterate entire formations, threatened to undermine these deeply ingrained cultural norms. Kamehameha navigated this cultural clash with remarkable skill. He understood that completely abandoning tradition was not only impractical, but also unwise. It would alienate his people and undermine his authority. Instead, he sought a powerful synthesis. His warriors did not cast aside their pahoa or ko'oko'o. Instead, they learned to fight with them alongside muskets. They combined their intimate knowledge of the terrain, their guerrilla tactics honed over generations, and their fierce, often hand-to-hand combat prowess with the devastating firepower of Western weapons. Imagine a skirmish where warriors, clad in traditional malo and feather cloaks, first unleash a volley of musketry, then charge with spears and daggers, supported by strategic cannon fire from shore or from adapted canoes. This combination created an unprecedented fighting machine, a blend of native ferocity and superior firepower that no other island chief could match. Kamehameha began to build his own fleet of Western-style ships, crewed by Hawaiians trained by Young and Davis. These vessels, equipped with cannons, gave him unparalleled mobility and projection of power across the vast oceanic distances between the islands. He established armories, teaching his men how to load, fire, and maintain firearms. He even implemented a system of tactical training that blended traditional Hawaiian maneuvers with European formations. The transformation of Kamehameha's forces was nothing short of revolutionary. He crafted an army and navy that were uniquely Hawaiian in spirit and personnel, yet formidable in their adoption of foreign technology. This fusion created an unstoppable military force, allowing him to overwhelm his rivals not merely through numbers or courage, but through a decisive technological edge and a strategic brilliance that embraced change while honoring tradition. The stage was now set for the ultimate conquest, the unification of the entire Hawaiian archipelago under a single, powerful ruler. But the true secret weapon in Kamehameha's arsenal wasn't just the cannons themselves or the muskets he distributed to his warriors. It was the presence of a few foreign advisors, men who understood these new technologies not just as static objects, but as dynamic tools of war. But the true secret weapon in Kamehameha's arsenal wasn't just the cannons themselves or the muskets he distributed to his warriors. It was the presence of a few foreign advisors, men who understood these new technologies not just as static objects, but as dynamic tools of war. Kamehameha began preparing for his ultimate goal, the unification of the entire Hawaiian archipelago. This wasn't a sudden surge of ambition, but a meticulous, years-long endeavor, a testament to his strategic genius and foresight. He knew that brute force alone, even with superior weapons, would be insufficient. The scale of his ambition demanded unprecedented logistical planning, diplomatic cunning, and an understanding of geopolitical tides. The first step was to build an invasion force unlike anything seen before in the islands. This meant not just training warriors, but equipping them, feeding them, and transporting them across treacherous oceanic channels. He ordered the construction of a massive war fleet. These were not just simple canoes. Many were double-hulled, capable of carrying dozens of warriors along with their provisions, weapons, and even some of the lighter swivel cannons. Imagine hundreds of these vessels, sails unfurled, paddling in unison across the vast Pacific, a formidable armada poised for conquest. Each canoe was a feat of engineering, carved from massive tree trunks, lashed together with sennit, and adorned with symbols of power. Hundreds, if not thousands, of skilled craftsmen, from canoe builders to rope makers, were mobilized for this gargantuan task. Simultaneously, the integration of foreign weaponry continued. Armories were established, not just for storage, but for maintenance and repair. Hawaiian warriors, traditionally masters of close-quarters combat, learned to handle muskets with growing proficiency. They practiced volley fire, understood the importance of reloading speed, and integrated these new tactics into their traditional formations. The European understanding of artillery placement and coordinated fire was taught by Young and Davis, transforming the effectiveness of even a few cannons. This blended military doctrine meant that Kamehameha's forces could engage from a distance with devastating firepower, then close in for the traditional melee with their spears and war clubs, a combination that proved psychologically devastating to their adversaries. But Kamehameha's genius wasn't limited to military engineering and training. He was also a shrewd diplomat and an astute collector of intelligence. While he patiently built his power base on the Big Island, he kept a watchful eye on the political climate of the neighboring islands. He understood that internal divisions were often more potent than external threats. He cultivated informants, listened to returning traders, and analyzed the shifting alliances among the other chiefs. This sustained period of observation and intelligence gathering was crucial, allowing him to identify weaknesses and opportunities in the realms of his rivals. He understood that conquest was as much about timing and political maneuvering as it was about military might. Then, in 1794, fate seemed to intervene, opening a window of opportunity that Kamehameha was perfectly positioned to exploit. Kahekili II, the powerful and respected ruler of Maui, Molokai, and Lanai, died. Kahekili had long been Kamehameha's most formidable rival, a chieftain of immense prestige and strategic acumen who had successfully resisted Kamehameha in earlier skirmishes. His death immediately plunged his domain into a predictable succession crisis and power vacuum. His lands were divided, and ambitious relatives and subordinate chiefs began to vie for control, weakening the once united front against the rising power of the Big Island. Kamehameha recognized this moment for what it was, the precise, critical juncture to strike. This wasn't mere opportunism, it was a testament to his masterful understanding of political timing. To invade earlier would have meant facing a united and experienced adversary in Kahekili. To wait longer might have allowed a new, strong leader to emerge and consolidate power. But at this specific moment, with disunity and infighting rampant among his rivals, the path to expansion was clear. The strategic decision to launch his campaign precisely now showcased a level of geopolitical sophistication that was far ahead of his time. The invasion force Kamehameha assembled was of a scale truly unprecedented in Hawaiian history. Contemporary accounts, both native and foreign, speak of an armada of hundreds of war canoes. Some estimates put the number of warriors at several tens of thousands, a staggering figure for the era and the population of the islands. Imagine the logistical nightmare of mobilizing, equipping, and provisioning such a force. Food, water, weapons, ammunition for the muskets and cannons imported from far-off lands, all had to be carefully managed and transported. The sheer organizational effort required to bring together thousands of fierce warriors from different districts of the Big Island to coordinate their movements and ensure their loyalty speaks volumes about Kamehameha's leadership and the efficacy of his newly established chain of command, undoubtedly influenced by his foreign advisors. This was not a chaotic tribal migration, but a meticulously planned military operation, a display of coordinated power that signaled the dawn of a new era for the Hawaiian Islands. But as impressive as the sheer number of warriors was, the true marvel of Kamehameha's conquest lies in numbers that are almost impossible to verify today, but are cited frequently in historical accounts. The sheer scale of the logistical nightmare that was moving such a force across open ocean. To transport an estimated 10,000 to 12,000 warriors, along with their provisions, weapons, and essential supplies, required a fleet of thousands of canoes. These were not small, single-person vessels. These were large, sometimes double-hulled canoes, capable of carrying multiple warriors and substantial cargo, designed for long-distance voyages between islands. Imagine the resources required to construct such a fleet: native koa wood for the hulls, strong cordage for lashing and rigging, and the skilled labor of hundreds, if not thousands, of craftsmen working for months, perhaps even years. The organization of such an undertaking speaks to a level of societal complexity and centralized authority that challenges the conventional narrative of isolated primitive island communities. This was an industrial-scale mobilization hinting at a sophisticated infrastructure capable of supporting a nascent military superpower. The stage was set for an epic undertaking, the crossing of the Alenuihaha Channel. This stretch of ocean, notorious for its turbulent currents and unpredictable winds, is one of the most treacherous bodies of water in the Pacific. It was a formidable natural barrier, a deterrent to any but the most skilled and daring mariners. Yet, with his massive fleet and battle-hardened warriors, Kamehameha was not only ready to face it, but to conquer it. The successful traverse of the Alenuihaha Channel alone is a testament to the unparalleled skill of ancient Hawaiian navigators and canoe builders. These were not mere wooden boats. They were sophisticated vessels, meticulously crafted to withstand mighty swells and strong winds. The knowledge required to guide thousands of canoes across such a dangerous expanse without modern navigational instruments, relying solely on stars, currents, and wave patterns, is almost incomprehensible. It speaks to a deep connection with the ocean, a mastery passed down through generations, and an understanding of meteorology that rivals, if not surpasses, many contemporary naval capabilities. This was an armada fueled by an ancient technology and an innate wisdom of the sea. But beyond the technical prowess, the channel crossing was a profound psychological victory. It demonstrated an unwavering resolve, a physical manifestation of Kamehameha's ambition, and a clear signal to his enemies that no obstacle, natural or man-made, would deter him. The sheer sight of such a vast fleet emerging from the tempestuous waters of the Alenuihaha, a serpent of war canoes stretching for miles across the horizon, must have instilled a primal fear in the hearts of those who observed it. It was a display of power calculated to break the spirit of resistance before the first spear was even thrown. Kamehameha wasn't just campaigning for territory. He was waging a war for the very soul of the Hawaiian archipelago. Once the formidable Alenuihaha was breached, Kamehameha's forces swept through the islands with terrifying efficiency. Maui, Molokai, and Lanai fell in a series of swift and decisive campaigns that underscored the overwhelming superiority of his combined land and sea forces. The logistical and strategic planning that made the channel crossing possible now translated into battlefield dominance. The conquest of Maui, in particular, was a swift and brutal affair. The island's defenders, despite their valor, were simply no match for the sheer numbers and organized might of Kamehameha's invasion force. Accounts describe rapid advancements, with key defensive positions being overrun in short order. The coordination between the canoe fleet, which could land troops directly onto beaches, flanking existing defenses, and the land-based forces, was a defining characteristic of these campaigns. Molokai and Lanai, smaller and with fewer resources, were subjugated with even greater ease. The pattern was consistently repeated: an initial shock and awe campaign, followed by a systematic consolidation of power. Kamehameha employed a strategy that combined overwhelming force with psychological warfare. The reputation of his invincible army, augmented by his foreign advisors, often preceded him, causing some resistance to crumble before the full force of his invasion even arrived. The tales of his disciplined warriors, armed with both traditional weapons and modern muskets, spread like wildfire, eroding the will to fight among would-be defenders. The continued effectiveness of the combined traditional and Western military tactics was evident in every engagement. The disciplined ranks of Kamehameha's warriors, many of whom had been trained in European military drills, moved with precision. Their musketeers, strategically positioned, could unleash devastating volleys against less organized local forces. Simultaneously, the traditional Hawaiian warriors, masters of close-quarters combat, would engage in a tactical pincer movement, utilizing their knowledge of the terrain and the effectiveness of their traditional weaponry. It was a synergy of old and new, and it proved to be an unstoppable force. The strategic utilization of muskets was not just about firepower, it was about the psychological edge. The thunderous roar of the firearms, the smoke, and the instantaneous casualties they inflicted must have been terrifying to warriors accustomed to projectile weapons like spears and slings, which allowed more time for reaction. This technological advantage, combined with Kamehameha's numerical superiority and disciplined leadership, created an almost insurmountable barrier for his opponents. With Maui, Molokai, and Lanai under his firm control, Kamehameha had systematically eliminated his rivals and consolidated his power base. He had proven his strategic genius, his logistical mastery, and his battlefield prowess. All roads now led to the ultimate prize, Oahu. The final confrontation was looming, pitting Kamehameha and his newly forged kingdom against Kalanikupule, Kaiakili's successor and the ruling chief of Oahu. The stage was set for the climactic battle that would determine the fate of the Hawaiian archipelago. And the history books tell us exactly how it went down. The crossing to Oahu was fraught with peril, but Kamehameha's fleet, now bolstered by cannons and muskets, navigated the choppy waters. They landed their massive force at Waikiki, encountering Kalanikupule's formidable army. The battle that ensued, known as the Battle of Nuuanu, is vividly described in historical accounts. Kamehameha, utilizing his superior weaponry and tactical brilliance, is said to have driven Kalanikupule's forces back into the Nuuanu Valley. The Oahu warriors, trapped against the unforgiving cliffs, faced a brutal defeat. Many were either killed in battle or forced over the treacherous Pali cliffs, plunging hundreds of feet to their deaths, effectively ending organized resistance on the island. By 1795, Kamehameha had conquered Maui, Lanai, and Molokai, and with the fall of Oahu, he was on the cusp of uniting all the Hawaiian Islands under a single rule. Only Kauai and Niihau remained unconquered. According to the official narrative, Kamehameha made 2 attempts to invade Kauai, both foiled by unforeseen circumstances. The first, in 1796, was thwarted by a severe storm that scattered his fleet. The second, in 1804, was undone by a devastating epidemic, likely cholera or typhoid, that swept through his army, killing thousands, including many of his closest advisors. Recognizing the futility of further military campaigns, Kamehameha shifted his strategy from conquest to negotiation. In a stroke of diplomatic genius, he secured the voluntary cession of Kauai and Niihau from their chief Kaumoalii in 1810. This pivotal agreement, achieved without further bloodshed, marked the completion of Kamehameha's vision, the unification of the Hawaiian Islands into a single sovereign kingdom. He became Kamehameha the Great, the first king of the Hawaiian Kingdom, inaugurating a new era of peace and stability that would last for generations. But let's pause here for a moment. This account, as compelling as it is, invites us to look deeper, beyond the celebrated narrative of martial prowess and diplomatic savvy. What truly transpired on Oahu? What forces were at play that allowed for such a decisive, albeit brutal, victory? And what does the official story omit, perhaps intentionally, to shape our understanding of this critical historical juncture? The stage for the Battle of Nuuanu was carefully set, not just by Kamehameha's ambition, but by the strategic landscape of Oahu itself. Kalanikupule, the ruling chief of Oahu, was no stranger to warfare. He had proven his mettle in battles against Kamehameha's forces years earlier, even driving them back from Oahu after a prior invasion attempt. This time, however, the stakes were higher, and Kamehameha's preparations were far more extensive. The invading fleet, a formidable armada of war canoes, landed near Waikiki, a strategic beachhead that offered a clear path inland to Honolulu and eventually the Nuuanu Valley. The sheer scale of the landing force would have been a terrifying sight. Thousands of warriors, their canoes laden with supplies, weapons, and perhaps most crucially, the newly acquired foreign artillery. Kalanikupule, aware of Kamehameha's impending arrival, chose to concentrate his defenses in the Nuuanu Valley. This was a natural fortress, a narrow pass leading into the heart of Oahu, flanked by towering, impassable cliffs. It was a choke point, a place where a smaller, determined force could potentially hold off a larger one. His strategy was sound in theory. By bottlenecking Kamehameha's army, he could negate their numerical advantage and prevent a swift conquest of the island. But he underestimated the ferocity and the advanced weaponry of Kamehameha's forces. The march inland from Waikiki would have been a grueling affair, especially for an army accustomed to traditional Hawaiian warfare. With the integration of foreign muskets and cannons, the logistical challenges increased exponentially. But Kamehameha's forces, hardened by years of campaigning, were ready. They encountered initial resistance as they pushed deeper into Oahu, engaging in skirmishes that would have tested their resolve. However, the true test came when they reached the entrance of the Nuuanu Valley, where Kalanikupule's main army lay entrenched. The battle itself was a brutal, prolonged engagement. Accounts describe a relentless push by Kamehameha's warriors, who, buoyed by the devastating firepower of their cannons and muskets, systematically dismantled Kalanikupule's defenses. The sound of cannon fire echoing through the valley, the crack of muskets, and the clash of traditional weapons would have created a cacophony of war unprecedented in Hawaiian history. The Oahu warriors, despite their bravery and knowledge of the terrain, were at a severe disadvantage. Their spears and slingshots were no match for the long-range killing power of firearms. Slowly, inexorably, Kamehameha's forces gained ground, pushing Kalanikupule's soldiers further and further into the valley's treacherous confines. As the battle raged, Kalanikupule's forces found themselves trapped. The valley narrowed, and the impassable cliffs of Nuuanu Pali rose steeply on either side, offering no escape. The relentless pressure from Kamehameha's army, now pressing in from all sides, created a desperate situation. The climax of the battle is one of the most iconic and horrifying moments in Hawaiian history, the infamous final charge of Nuuanu Pali. Accounts tell of hundreds of Oahu warriors, with no avenue of retreat, being driven to the very edge of the precipice. Rather than surrender, many were forced or chose to leap over the 1,000-foot cliffs, plunging to their deaths on the rocky slopes below. The sheer scale of this tragedy is almost unimaginable, staining the victory with a grim legacy. The aftermath of the Battle of Nuuanu was decisive. With Kalanikupule's army shattered and countless warriors dead, Oahu was firmly in Kamehameha's grasp. The scale of the victory was immense, but its symbolic meaning was even greater. The conquest of Oahu, one of the most populous and strategically vital islands, left no doubt as to Kamehameha's dominance. After years of relentless campaigning, he had finally united the four major island kingdoms of Hawaii, Maui, Molokai, and Oahu under his rule. It was a monumental achievement, a testament to his military genius and his ruthless determination. The unification laid the groundwork for the Hawaiian Kingdom, an independent nation that would endure for generations. However, this triumphant narrative, while largely accepted, glosses over certain inconsistencies and questions that stubbornly cling to the edges of the official record. What if the decisive factors were not purely military prowess or diplomatic skill? What if there were other, less heroic forces at play? The Battle of Nuuanu, the final and most brutal engagement of Kamehameha's campaign, is often presented as a straightforward military victory. The official accounts speak of remarkable tactical maneuvers and Kamehameha's cunning. But even these narratives hint at a gruesome and perhaps less celebrated aspect of his triumph: the sheer, overwhelming brutality. The battle culminated with hundreds, possibly thousands of Oahu warriors being driven off the treacherous cliff face of Nuuanu Pali, plummeting to their deaths hundreds of feet below. This act of deliberate annihilation, rather than mere defeat, raises unsettling questions. Was this a strategic necessity, a grim but unavoidable consequence of war, or something more? The sheer scale of the slaughter, wiping out an entire opposing army, hints at a deeper, darker purpose. It solidified Kamehameha's control, yes, but it also obliterated any significant resistance, leaving an indelible scar on the island's memory. Official history attributes this overwhelming victory solely to Kamehameha's military genius and the superior skill of his warriors. However, this explanation feels incomplete when confronted with the accounts of the unprecedented number of casualties. What if the path to unification was paved not just with strategic brilliance, but with a calculated ruthlessness that transcended the normal bounds of combat? The speed and totality of the conquest, especially after the Nuuanu massacre, suggests a force so overwhelming that it left little room for prolonged resistance. It's a victory so decisive that it almost feels too easy. This isn't to diminish Kamehameha's achievements, but to question whether the conventional narrative fully accounts for the scale of the devastation and the psychological impact it must have had on the islands. The fear instilled by such a brutal display of power could have been as potent a weapon as any spear or cannon. Following the brutal subjugation at Nuuanu, a new and equally daunting challenge emerged for Kamehameha: how to transform a conquered collection of islands, each with its own customs, rivalries, and long-standing loyalties, into a unified and stable kingdom. The transition from conqueror to king is rarely a simple one, especially when the wounds of war are still fresh and the memory of independent rule lingers in the hearts of the vanquished. This was not merely about holding dominion, it was about forging a nation. Kamehameha's genius extended far beyond the battlefield. He understood that lasting power required more than just military might. It demanded a meticulously crafted political infrastructure. His first step was to establish a centralized government, replacing the fragmented chieftaincies with a cohesive administrative system. He appointed governors to each of the conquered islands, but crucially, these were not arbitrary choices. These were typically trusted family members or long-standing allies, individuals whose loyalty was beyond question and whose authority derived directly from his own. This network of loyal administrators ensured that Kamehameha's decrees were enforced consistently across the entire archipelago, effectively binding the disparate islands into a single political entity. This move, however, must have been met with resentment and resistance from many of the local chiefs, whose power and autonomy were now severely curtailed. The transition from independent sovereign to an appointed governor, even if of royal blood, is a significant demotion, and the potential for internal strife was ever present. Yet, Kamehameha's firm hand and the lingering fear from his conquests kept overt rebellion in check, at least initially. Perhaps the most iconic and enduring testament to Kamehameha's vision as a ruler is the Kanawai Mamalaho, or the Law of the Splintered Paddle. This groundbreaking legal reform, enacted even before the full unification of the islands, stands in stark contrast to the brutal realities of war. The story goes that early in his career, while still a chieftain consolidating various districts on Hawaii Island, Kamehameha was ambushed on a beach. During the struggle, his leg became caught in a reef, and a fisherman, in an act of self-defense, struck him on the head with a paddle, splintering it. Instead of retaliating, Kamehameha later reflected on the incident, and recognizing the injustice he himself had inadvertently caused by invading another's territory, established a law protecting non-combatants. The Law of the Splintered Paddle decreed that all common people, the old, the women, and the children, could lie by the roadside without fear of harm. It was a revolutionary concept for its time, a declaration that even amidst the chaos of war, the innocent were to be protected. This law not only reflected a remarkable degree of compassion from a warrior king, but also served a pragmatic purpose. It fostered a sense of security and trust among the populace, encouraging their cooperation and integration into his burgeoning kingdom. It was a strategic move to soften the image of the conqueror and present himself as a just and benevolent ruler, thereby legitimizing his rule in the eyes of his new subjects. Beyond internal governance, Kamehameha shrewdly recognized the growing influence of foreign powers. European and American traders and whalers were increasingly frequent visitors to the islands, bringing with them not only goods but also diseases, weapons, and competing ideologies. Kamehameha understood the potential for both enrichment and exploitation. He implemented strict regulations on trade, controlling access to vital resources like sandalwood, and ensuring that transactions benefited the Hawaiian government rather than individual opportunists. He meticulously managed foreign relations, skillfully playing competing powers against each other to prevent any single nation from gaining too much leverage. His goal was clear: to maintain Hawaiian sovereignty and prevent the islands from becoming a mere colonial outpost. This required a delicate balance of diplomacy and firmness, allowing the benefits of foreign commerce while zealously guarding against foreign domination. He allowed foreign advisors, but never let them dictate policy, always maintaining ultimate authority. The culmination of these efforts was an unprecedented era of peace and stability. For centuries prior, the Hawaiian Islands had been a crucible of constant inter-island warfare, a cycle of conquest and subjugation that frequently plunged the populace into conflict. Kamehameha's unified rule brought an end to this bloody chapter. The energy and resources previously expended on warfare could now be redirected towards the internal development and cultural flourishing. This newfound peace fostered a powerful sense of shared Hawaiian identity, transcending the old tribal loyalties. For the first time, all Kanaka Maoli, native Hawaiians, were subjects of a single monarch, bound by a common set of laws and a unified vision. The psychological impact of this shift cannot be overstated. No longer living under the constant threat of invasion, the people experienced a degree of security and collective purpose previously unknown. This wasn't merely the absence of war. It was the active construction of a nation, albeit one forged in the fires of brutal conquest. While the means to achieve this unity were undeniably harsh, the outcome for many was a welcome stability, a foundation upon which a new Hawaiian society could grow. Kamehameha's reforms went beyond military might and territorial expansion. He understood that a kingdom needed coherent laws and a stable economy to truly thrive. He introduced a new land management system, replacing the fragmented control of local chiefs with a more centralized approach. This not only streamlined resource allocation, but also curtailed the power of potential rivals, binding the land directly to the crown. Furthermore, he recognized the importance of trade and encouraged economic activity, establishing a foundation for a more prosperous future. He even famously issued the Law of the Splintered Paddle, guaranteeing the safety of commoners, effectively transitioning from a system of raw conquest to one that sought to protect its citizens. This wasn't merely benevolent leadership, it was shrewd statecraft, designed to prevent internal strife and solidify his legitimacy. His reign marked a profound transformation from a collection of warring tribes to a single unified nation, forever altering the destiny of the Hawaiian Islands. But despite Kamehameha's triumphs, a lingering challenge remained. Two islands to the far west, Kauai and Niihau, stubbornly maintained their independence. These islands, under the shrewd leadership of Chief Kumualii, represented the final pieces of the Hawaiian puzzle. Separated by a treacherous channel and often buffeted by fierce storms, Kauai and Niihau presented a formidable obstacle to Kamehameha's ambitions. Direct military conquest by sea was a perilous undertaking, as the king had learned through bitter experience. Kamehameha's initial attempts to bring Kauai under his dominion were marked by frustration and failure. At least 2 major invasions were planned, both ending in disaster before his vast armada could even reach the shores of Kaumoali's domain. In 1796, a massive fleet of canoes laden with warriors was assembled on Oahu. Kamehameha, fresh from his victories on Maui and Oahu, was confident that Kauai would fall as easily as the others. But nature had other plans. A sudden violent storm swept through the Hawaiian Islands, scattering his fleet, sinking many canoes, and drowning innumerable warriors. The remnants of his battered forces limped back to Oahu, their morale severely shaken. This wasn't just a setback, it was a devastating loss of men, resources, and face for a king who had seemed unstoppable. A second, equally ambitious invasion was planned around 1804. This time, Kamehameha had acquired Western expertise and technology, including cannons and muskets, and even hired foreign advisors. He amassed an even larger force, determined to overcome the natural defenses of the channel. But once again, disaster struck, though not in the form of a storm. A virulent epidemic, likely cholera or a highly aggressive influenza brought by foreign ships, swept through his assembled forces on Oahu. Thousands of warriors, previously healthy and ready for battle, succumbed to the unseen enemy almost overnight. The invasion army was decimated, not by Kaumoali's warriors, but by disease. The stench of death permeated the camps, and the will to fight evaporated. Kamehameha himself fell gravely ill, narrowly escaping death. These repeated failures underscored the brutal reality. Brute force alone, even with a seemingly invincible army, could not overcome every obstacle. The cost in lives and resources for a military conquest of Kauai was simply too high. Faced with these crushing defeats and the immense cost of failed invasions, Kamehameha, ever the pragmatist, realized that a different approach was needed. He shifted his strategy from military might to diplomatic finesse. His patience, a hallmark of his long reign, would prove to be his greatest weapon against Kaumoali. Instead of launching another costly and potentially disastrous invasion, he initiated a series of negotiations employing missionaries, traders, and trusted advisors as intermediaries. Kamehameha understood that forcing the issue might lead to prolonged guerrilla warfare or resistance that would destabilize his newly unified kingdom. He sought to integrate Kauai and Niihau peacefully, demonstrating a far greater strategic vision than mere conquest. This patient, diplomatic overture culminated in 1810 with a landmark agreement. Rather than fight a war he couldn't win without immense sacrifice, Kamehameha offered Kaumoali terms that were both generous and incredibly shrewd. Kaumoali agreed to become a vassal of Kamehameha, acknowledging him as the paramount ruler of the entire Hawaiian archipelago. However, in a move that showcased Kamehameha's political genius, Kaumoali was allowed to retain almost complete administrative control over Kauai and Niihau for the remainder of his life. He would continue to govern his people, manage his lands, and collect taxes, effectively ruling as a semi-independent king under Kamehameha's ultimate authority. This agreement was a triumph of diplomacy. For Kaumoali, it preserved his autonomy and prevented the devastation of his islands through war. For Kamehameha, it completed the unification of the Hawaiian Islands without shedding another drop of blood. It solidified his legacy as the unifier of Hawaii, bringing all islands under a single monarch. This wasn't merely a political arrangement, it was a profound historical moment, marking the true birth of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a single, sovereign entity. The long, bloody saga of inter-island warfare had finally drawn to a close, replaced by a unified administration and a nascent sense of national identity. The peaceful submission of Kauai and Niihau completed what Kamehameha had set out to achieve decades earlier, a fully united Hawaiian kingdom. This act, more than any battle, cemented his reputation as not just a great warrior, but a visionary statesman. The challenges he faced in bringing these last islands into the fold The destructive storms, the devastating epidemics, the logistical nightmares of oceanic warfare, all underscored the fragility of power and the limits of military force. His eventual turn to diplomacy highlighted an evolving understanding of governance, one that recognized the value of negotiation and strategic compromise over endless conflict. With the entire archipelago now under his undisputed rule, Kamehameha could finally focus on internal development and solidifying the foundations of his new nation. The unification, achieved through a blend of ruthless military conquest and astute political maneuvering, ushered in an era of relative peace and stability for the Hawaiian people. This was a critical juncture, moving beyond the era of perpetual warfare and laying the groundwork for a distinctly Hawaiian future. The consolidation of power had been a long and arduous process, fraught with danger and unimaginable hardship. But as a result, a single powerful kingdom emerged from the fragmented chieftainships, ready to face the ever-encroaching challenges of the wider world. The question now was what kind of nation this unified Hawaii would become, and what new threats it would face as it navigated a rapidly changing global landscape. However, one critical puzzle piece remained: the northern islands of Kauai and Niihau. These islands, under the steadfast leadership of King Kamehameha I, had managed to resist Kamehameha's earlier unification attempts, leveraging their strategic location and formidable defenses. Their continued independence presented not only a potential threat, but also an unclosed chapter in Kamehameha's vision of a unified Hawaiian nation. So, how did this holdout finally integrate into the larger kingdom? The tale of their submission is a strange mix of diplomacy, fate, and perhaps a touch of divine intervention, leading to a conclusion that still sparks debate among historians and islanders alike. Kamehameha, deeply rooted in the ancient ways, understood the power of symbolism and the importance of a bloodless transition. His relentless pursuit of unification was never solely about conquest. It was about establishing a lasting legacy, a framework for a sovereign nation. The question of Kauai and Niihau, the northern islands that had stubbornly clung to their independence, was not just a military dilemma, but a test of his ultimate vision. How could he declare a unified kingdom if even a fragment remained outside his grasp? He had learned from past failures, from the devastating losses at sea, and from the futility of brute force against an unyielding spirit. This time, the approach would be different, a testament to his evolving statesmanship. By 1810, the political landscape had shifted. King Kamehameha of Kauai, a shrewd and pragmatic leader in his own right, recognized the changing tides. Kamehameha's power was undeniable. Repeated attempts to invade Kauai had been thwarted not by force of arms, but by a series of unforeseen events, storms, epidemics, and logistical nightmares. It almost seemed as if the gods themselves protected Kamehameha's domain, or perhaps simply favored a less violent resolution. Facing a choice between inevitable devastating war and a strategic alliance, Kamehameha chose the latter. In a remarkable act of diplomacy, rather than bloodshed, Kamehameha voluntarily acknowledged Kamehameha as his sovereign. He traveled to Oahu, a journey fraught with risk, but one that cemented a new era. In a powerful ceremony, he formally submitted to Kamehameha, not as a vanquished foe, but as a respected peer joining a larger whole. In return, Kamehameha, demonstrating a wisdom far beyond simple triumph, allowed Kamehameha to remain the Ali'i Nui, the supreme ruler of Kauai and Niihau, albeit under the overarching authority of the newly formed Hawaiian Kingdom. This wasn't a surrender. It was a pact, a strategic integration that preserved dignity while consolidating power. The Northern Islands were now part of the unified nation, not through conquest, but through a negotiated peace. This final act of integration, achieved through diplomacy and mutual respect rather than conquest, cemented Kamehameha's vision. With Kauai and Ni'ihau peacefully folded into the kingdom, the entire Hawaiian archipelago stood united under a single crown. The long, arduous chapter of internecine warfare was finally closed. Kamehameha's reign continued for another 9 years, a period dedicated not to warfare, but to nation-building. He established a legal code, the Mamalaho Kanawai, or Law of the Splintered Paddle, which protected commoners from the abuse of power by chiefs and warriors. He nurtured trade, encouraging foreign merchants while carefully regulating their influence, understanding that their goods and technologies could benefit Hawaii, but only if controlled. He built roads, organized fisheries, and promoted agriculture, laying the economic foundations for a stable society. He was both a warrior and a statesman, a conqueror and a king who understood that true power lay not just in force, but in the well-being of his people and the stability of his institutions. Then, in May of 1819, at the age of around 62, Kamehameha the Great passed away in Kamakahonu, Kona, on the island of Hawaii. His death, after decades of rule, marked a pivotal moment in Hawaiian history. But unlike the violent successions that had plagued the islands for centuries, Kamehameha's passing was followed by a peaceful transfer of power. His eldest son, Liholiho, ascended the throne as Kamehameha II. This smooth transition, a testament to a stable political system carefully cultivated by the elder Kamehameha, stood in stark contrast to the chaotic successions that often followed the death of powerful rulers in other parts of the world, and indeed, prior to his own rule in Hawaii. It was an extraordinary achievement, proving that his vision of a centralized and unified government could endure beyond his formidable presence. The Hawaiian Kingdom, born from Kamehameha's singular will, would endure for over 80 years as an independent nation. This was a remarkable feat, especially considering the relentless pressures of Western expansion, the insatiable hunger of colonial powers, and the ever-present threat of annexation that swallowed so many other indigenous nations during the 19th century. From 1810 to 1893, when it was overthrown by American and European businessmen with the clandestine support of the U.S. military, Hawaii navigated a complex global landscape, maintaining its sovereignty for generations. This longevity is a direct legacy of Kamehameha's foundational work. His achievement was not merely conquering islands, it was forging a modern nation-state. He replaced the fragmented tribal systems with a centralized government, implemented unified laws across the archipelago, and fostered a shared Hawaiian identity that transcended regional loyalties. He was the architect of a new political order, one that enabled Hawaii to engage with the world as a unified entity rather than a collection of warring chiefs. Perhaps one of Kamehameha's most astute contributions was his approach to cultural preservation amidst the burgeoning foreign influence. He understood the power of foreign technology and trade, but he also recognized the corrosive potential of unchecked cultural erosion. He adopted foreign technologies, but never allowed them to completely supplant traditional Hawaiian practices and beliefs. He allowed missionaries to preach, but resisted their attempts to completely dismantle the ancient kapu system during his lifetime. He carefully managed the influx of Westerners, recognizing their utility while fiercely protecting Hawaiian lands and traditions from exploitation. This delicate balance, while not perfectly maintained by his successors, set a precedent for navigating globalization without losing the soul of the nation. Today, Kamehameha the Great remains an undeniable heroic figure in Hawaiian history and contemporary culture. His legacy is celebrated with annual holidays, and majestic statues honoring him stand prominently across the islands, particularly the iconic one in front of Aliolani Hale in Honolulu. He is revered as the warrior king, the unifier, the founder of the Hawaiian nation, a figure whose vision and perseverance laid the bedrock for what would become modern Hawaii. His story is not just one of military might, but of strategic brilliance, diplomatic acumen, and ultimately a profound dedication to his people. But even a king as powerful and visionary as Kamehameha could not foresee all the challenges that lay ahead for his fledgling nation. The world was changing at an unprecedented pace, and Hawaii, now unified, would soon face external forces far more insidious than any internal strife. The next chapter in Hawaiian history would be one of navigating the treacherous waters of international politics, colonial ambition, and the relentless march of industrialization. A new kind of battle, one not fought with spears and canoes, was about to begin. Kamehameha's journey, from a prophesied child of destiny to the undisputed monarch of the Hawaiian archipelago, is a tale woven with threads of extraordinary ambition, relentless conflict, and astonishing success. We've seen how he navigated the brutal landscape of inter-island warfare, leveraging both ancestral wisdom and newly acquired foreign technologies. We've explored his strategic brilliance, his adaptability in the face of shifting political tides, and his uncanny ability to inspire unwavering loyalty even from his conquered foes. He was a leader who understood the balance of power, the necessity of both force and diplomacy, and the profound impact of cultural preservation, even as the world around him clamored for change. But let's pause and consider the sheer anomaly of Kamehameha's achievement. In a turbulent era marked by colonial expansion and the relentless carving up of indigenous lands, a local leader, commanding a relatively isolated population, managed to not only unify a disparate collection of warring chiefdoms, but also solidify them into a robust, centralized monarchy. This wasn't merely a temporary alliance or a fragile peace. It was the birth of a nation that would assert its sovereignty on the global stage for nearly a century. How did he do it? In a world where European powers were systematically dismantling ancient systems and imposing their will, Kamehameha stood as a defiant counter-narrative, forging a kingdom that remained steadfastly Hawaiian at its core. The enduring mystique of his success begs further contemplation. Was it pure military prowess, honed through countless battles and a keen understanding of tactics? Was it truly divine favor, as suggested by the ancient prophecies and the powerful imagery of the fiery comets streaking across the sky? Or was it something more profound, an unmatched understanding of human nature, a charismatic leadership that transcended tribal loyalties and united people under a common vision? Perhaps it was a potent combination of all these elements, converging in a single, remarkable individual at a pivotal moment in history. Kamehameha didn't just conquer, he transformed. He took a fragmented society, perpetually embroiled in conflict, and imbued it with a sense of shared identity and purpose that forged the very concept of a Hawaiian nation. His lasting legacy is monumental. He left behind a unified Hawaii, a sovereign nation that would stand as a beacon of independence in the Pacific for generations. This wasn't just a testament to his military genius, but to his foresight and administrative acumen. He established a codified legal system, centralized governance, and fostered a period of relative peace and prosperity that allowed Hawaiian culture to flourish creatively and economically. The framework he laid down enabled his successors to navigate the increasingly complex web of international relations, maintaining a delicate balance between engagement and autonomy. The very existence of a Hawaiian monarchy, recognized by world powers, is a direct result of Kamehameha's foundational achievements. In the annals of history, there are conquerors who leave behind vast empires that crumble shortly after their demise. And then there are nation builders, individuals whose vision and leadership forge something far more enduring. Kamehameha I belongs firmly in the latter category. He was more than a warrior king. He was an architect of identity, a visionary who didn't just conquer lands, but who painstakingly wove together the disparate threads of an archipelago into a cohesive, enduring tapestry. He forged a nation from the very soul of the islands, a testament to what one extraordinary individual can achieve when destiny, brilliance, and an unwavering will converge. His story is a poignant reminder that even in the most tumultuous times, individuals can rise to shape the course of history, not merely with force, but with an unparalleled understanding of their people and their place in the world. This is not merely a tale of conquest, but of profound transformation. Kamehameha didn't just win battles, he masterminded a social and economic revolution. Before him, the islands were fractured, often crippled by internal strife and the brutal demands of local chiefs. He dismantled the old oppressive kapu system, a complex set of religious, social, and political laws that governed every aspect of Hawaiian life, often with severe penalties for infraction. While the kapu system brought order, it also maintained rigid social hierarchies and could be incredibly cruel. Kamehameha understood that true unity required a new framework. He introduced laws that protected commoners, ensuring that even the humblest farmer had rights and a degree of security previously unknown. He encouraged trade, not just amongst the islands, but with the burgeoning number of foreign vessels that began to frequent Hawaiian waters. He saw the potential for prosperity in these exchanges, carefully controlling access to valuable resources like sandalwood to prevent exploitation and maintain Hawaiian sovereignty through economic strength. He built immense fleets of canoes, not just for war, but for trade and transportation, creating a logistical network that knitted the islands together. He fostered literacy and introduced new technologies, always with an eye towards strengthening his people and their future. But perhaps his greatest legacy was his foresight. Kamehameha recognized the growing presence of Western powers and understood the existential threat they posed to Hawaii's independence. Instead of resisting through futile armed conflict, he chose a path of shrewd diplomacy and strategic integration. He welcomed explorers and traders, but on his terms. He learned from them, adapted their innovations, but never allowed them to dictate policy or usurp authority. He created a truly sovereign nation, recognized by foreign powers, establishing a foundational independence that allowed Hawaii to navigate the choppy waters of 19th century geopolitics for generations. Before Kamehameha, Hawaii was a collection of warring chiefdoms, a paradise perpetually on the brink of internal collapse and vulnerable to external forces. After him, it was a unified kingdom, stable and self-reliant, a beacon in the Pacific. His actions echo across the centuries, a testament to a leader who not only wielded power, but understood its true purpose: to build, to protect, and to leave a lasting inheritance for his people. The story of Kamehameha the Great is not just a chapter of Hawaiian history, but a profound lesson in leadership, vision, and the enduring power of a singular will to shape destiny itself.